Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. We will get started in just a couple of minutes as people are logging into today's session. Thank you very much for attending our SMB Cybersecurity Educational Thought Leadership Series. We'll get started in just a minute or two. Thank you. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stuart Cohen. I'm the president of IGI Cyber Labs. I want to thank you for participating in today's discussion. We are fortunate enough to have three industry icons focused on the cyber insurance space, and specifically, how cyber insurance can be handled, can be evaluated as it relates to small businesses and medium-sized business. As always, these are done in a public service announcement type of approach. This is not a commercial for any of the organizations. This is really about providing an education to primarily, SMB leaders, owners, and investors that are involved in small and medium businesses, and help them with the challenges they face as it relates to cybersecurity, while they continue to run their business, which is the job they have. They need to talk, they need to think about the criticality of their data, the availability of their systems, and if something happens, make sure they have the business continuity plans in place so their business can come back up quickly and they can go back to running the business they have in mind. So that's what this session's all about. It's about providing a few, I would say, opportunities for people to get a little bit smarter, to get a little bit safer. As always, we want to hear from you. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat box. Please put it in the question box. We'll do our best to make this as interactive as possible. We've gotten a number of pre-submitted questions in advance, so thank you for those. And the recording will be available after the fact. We'll have it out on YouTube. It'll also include the slides from today's session. We'll also give you the contact information for everybody that is speaking today. If you want to connect with them individually, or if you want us to connect you to them, you can come back through our website. So with that, just a couple of things before we get started. If we go to the next slide. So just as I said, this is designed as a public service announcement type of approach. If you're interested in hearing more about Nodeware, or you want to ask a question to one of your peers, either an end user organization and company that's using it, or an MSP that's providing that service locally, providing local assistance and support, we have our next live demo and peer Q&A session coming up on the 24th. Nick McCourt from Integris IT, a large nationwide MSP, will be joining us on the 24th to answer any questions you have. And then we will be talking about the importance of compliance frameworks to building cyber resiliency with Tony Sager, the grandfather of vulnerability management and the head of the CIS 18 and the Center for Information Security, and Jeff Hathcote, a security engineer and industry icon from Talaris, to provide their perspectives. So with that, I'd like to get into today's session itself. I want to introduce our three speakers. We have Nina Prasad with us from Aon. She's part of the small business team. We are fortunate to have her to give her perspective on some of the things that are going on in the marketplace. She's going to kick off today's session in just a couple of minutes with a couple of slides that she wants to go through. Bryan Hurd, who's the chief of office at Aon as well, is with us. And Dan Law, who is the Vice President of National Accounts at Cowbell Cyber. And the three of them will be providing a little bit of a fireside chat as we go through a few slides, answer a few questions. But we're really here to help you. We're here to help you answer your questions. give you some perspective, give you some advice. So with that, Nina, I want to turn it over directly to you. I want to thank you for participating and giving this audience your time, your perspectives, and your insights.
Thanks, Stuart. Megan, if you can go to the next slide. So we wanted to kick off this session just putting this out there, the state of the cyber insurance market. And this graphic shows quarterly pricing from 2021. This is Aon data. So you can see that starting from Q1, the pricing increases we were seeing were closer to the 30% range, and then in Q4 they drastically increased all the way to 100%. And so that is a reflection of what our underwriters are seeing in the market. Early in 2021, there was a heightened concern around ransomware, and as they started to see the losses develop, they were seeing that their profitability levels were not matching what they were asking for their premiums. A couple years ago, 2-3 years ago, cyber insurance was quite easy to procure. There weren't as many questions being asked about controls, and the pricing was very low. But because when we started seeing all these ransomware losses, that profitability went away for all of our underwriters. And so you are seeing in this slide that in 2021 there was an adjustment to make sure that these underwriters can continue to cover cyber liability, but that with that there is a focus on pricing. But the more important thing that we're going to talk about today is looking at controls and the controls of the companies and making sure that there is a strong focus on the company and your risk posture. So if we want to go to the next slide, there are 10 different controls that we have seen that underwriters mainly are concerned about. You can see them here on this slide. A couple that I think that are really important, and Bryan, Dan, and I discussed this prior. MFA. MFA is huge. If you don't have that, you're basically not going to be able to get insurance. The other couple that I think are really important are patch management, your Active Directory or service accounts, and your backups. And these four are, those are four, but there's a lot of different other ones on this slide. Endpoint protection and response, secure RDP, VPN, network segmentation. So while I mentioned those four, all 10 of these are really important. And if you are looking to procure cyber insurance, this is a great start to look and see, do we have all of these? Can we address all of these concerns in a positive way, or have a story to tell that we are working on these controls? And that is a great way to start looking at your, procuring cyber insurance, or just in general looking at your posture.
Yeah, that's a great point, Nina, and it was great to connect on this earlier and understand that we are in lockstep from an underwriting perspective based on what you're seeing on the broking side of the business. So we really are looking for those key areas: the MFA, an incident response plan, the patch management cadence, and backups that are tested, that are offline, that are encrypted, that we know can be put in place in the event a ransomware attack takes place. So it wasn't too long ago when I think there was a broader divide between what brokers were seeing and asking for versus what carriers were seeing and trying to interpret on the back end. And kudos to, I think, everybody in the supply chain sort of getting on the same page there with an understanding of what it takes to underwrite some of these risks. And some of these things that are here will depend on the industry that the insured is in. So manufacturing businesses, higher education, utilities, things like that, may get a more critical eye from underwriters than other less severe sort of classes of business, people that aren't maybe as readily as targets. But certainly what we found is nobody is immune to ransom events out there, regardless of what business you're in. You could be the corner ice cream store in Main Street America, or a large fuel supplier. and everywhere in between is a target of these attacks.
So,
And to mirror
Bryan,
this, go ahead, please, Stuart.
Bryan, before you comment, a couple of things. One, we have a series of poll questions that we always, give the results to our the Nodeware Advisory Council. So we'd appreciate. We're going to put up the first poll question. So if everybody could respond to that, we would appreciate it. And Bryan, at the same time, we got a question about, how much would it cost to implement these 10 requirements, right? And some sort of broad range, as all businesses are different and your mileage may vary, but people trying to get a feel for what would it take for a small business to have to begin to put something like this in place.
Well, I'll answer that question and expand it a little bit. Is first and foremost, the cost of not doing it far exceeds the cost of doing it. And I've been called in as a cyber smoke jumper, helping major corporations as well as small, medium businesses when it goes wrong. Not only just the ransomware and the ransom, but the compromise of employee records, the penalties and fines, or for most of small and medium businesses, the potential end of the business. It's not a discussion on whether or not you pay the ransom. It's whether or not you can get back to business and whether or not the organization continues to exist. The other thing I'll say is, while many hope that for every dollar I spend on IT, I get $1 in premium, the analogy I'll use, which holds, and I see that a lot of people work for vendors, there's some small businesses on, as well as some MSP personnel as well on the call based on the poll. It's the same thing as, buying, better improved security for your house doesn't take that same dollar and take it off of your insurance premium. It does make you a better candidate for them to give you insurance. And it's not, to a degree, it's one, if you qualify at all, and then two, at what price? Or you're what's known as self-insured, underinsured, not insured at all, or the fancy word for it, if you do some paperwork, is called a captive. It all means you're your own insurance company in some way or another, and Dan and the carriers are not on the hook for whatever you do. So the things about this list, and if you're not going to get insurance or can't afford it, this list is more important to you than it is to Nina and Dan, because now you are the person that pays for the insurance event. You want to make sure these things are in place. Now, this list is not just made up of underwriters' concerns. What Dan and Nina are bringing back to you is the root cause analytics of all the claims of the people that preceded you. These are the very things that would have stopped the spark or spread of a major incident. Now, this is one way of looking at them. Next slide, please. These same 9-10 areas on a kill chain show you the watertight compartments of how the ship doesn't sink. I'm prior Navy, so I like Navy analogies, but for those of you in the terrestrial world, these are the sprinkler systems, fire doors, and smoke detectors of their day. And they're arrayed in a way that is quite logical. What stops somebody from hitting an email account? What stops them from laterally moving? What stops them from holding you ransom for them encrypting your stuff? It is not a made-up list. It's not randomly selected. It's selected with the law of big numbers in the insurance industry. And I'll pass it back to Nina and Dan to talk about how there's that virtuous loop, so to speak, in the insurance industry of good behavior, tightening and loosing markets, which brings this into context. And then we can talk about some of the new things we're seeing as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Bryan. I mean, we used to have a lot of conversations about discounts associated with certain controls, and now it's really a function of insurability in the first place and being able to get the coverage at all. If we go to the next slide, and understanding that it is an evolving loop, and data is coming in from various sources out there. So I don't want to speak too specifically to Cowbell. There are, folks out there doing this, but from an underwriting model standpoint, a lot of us in this space, we are looking and pulling data signals wherever we can find them on businesses out there, not totally reliant on you checking boxes on an application as to what you have in place, because we all know asking that question, do you have MFA? It's not really a yes or no question that you can answer. It's going to speak to different levels and different functions within the organization? Do you have it on critical systems? Do you have it on email? And it doesn't apply to certain industries. You know, it's very tough in an educational environment to have MFA on student laptops that you're giving them in a K through 12 school. So there are a lot of things at play there. You know, we at Cowbell are looking at outside-in data, you know, 1,000+ risk signals on each business that we are underwriting, and we actually go out and effectively underwrite about 23 million small businesses throughout the United States at this point in time. So it gives us a wealth of data and understanding about organizations, their controls, their outside-in intelligence as far as we can see it. And if we go to the next slide, a little bit of a deeper dive on some of that stuff that we're looking at here. And what we really aim to do is get a broader understanding of these businesses. And Nina, I think you probably see some of this stuff in your world as well, with various services that are available out there, and some of the external data that folks are looking at.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see the evolution of the underwriting process from 2 years ago to now. And now it is very data driven. Like you said, the questions are not just yes or no. We typically want to see more of an explanation. Insurers want to see that there's a story behind your InfoSec stance. And so there are reports. So Cowbell has their report that they run. Other insurers use third parties or might have their own reports that they run. And that's just the first step. And then the second step is gathering data around your MSA, those 10 controls that we talked about, but even more so than that. And then also, you know, back to Bryan's point, and Dan, I think we're all going to say this, it's now not a factor of, because I have this, okay, I can maybe see some savings. It's, do you have this? Okay, yes, we're comfortable to insure this company. If you don't, then like Bryan said, you might be self-insuring for the cyber liability risk. And it's something that I think now more and more companies, you're seeing the need to have it, whether it be contractual or mandated by a board or other factors with internally and externally. So it is something that I think probably every company is concerned about.
If we go to the next slide real quick.
Hey,
yeah,
Dan, before you go there, you know, I'm curious, we got a question specifically about the small businesses role, and in the case of data, and in particular our case with vulnerability management and continuous scanning, a lot of which is done by the MSPs supporting their clients. Can you talk a little bit about what's required at the MSP level supporting the clients as you evaluate a small business versus what might be, if you will, in the small business itself? And does the MSP have any effect or any accountability as it relates to that?
I'll start off and then I'll bring it around, Dan, to you, because I'll kind of lay out the overall brokering and then insurer process, if okay. So for those of you on, you actually have almost the entirety of the life cycle of the insurance industry on to address the question. Aon and Nina are the brokers that go out to all the insurers, and you have a real live insurer on with Cowbell and Dan, and both of them then talk to the underwriters that write the policies. And I do either beforehand working with CISOs or after as the cyber smoke jumper. So we're covering the whole life cycle here. I would say that one of the things for small, medium businesses, the role of an MSSP is the fact that it's not an army of one or a SEAL team of 2 or 3 that's defending that company. That's if there's an MSP with good business practice and a good reputation behind it, that absolutely makes it a much more enjoyable, if one could use that word, experience to talk about the monitoring, vulnerability, and things like that. Now, leaving aside, which is a huge discussion, the responsibility for the SLAs around vulnerability patching, it is a discussion. And that's where I'm going to hand it over to Nina and Dan to talk about Yes, it is a positive thing. Yes, there are questions around it. You need to answer with some specificity to address the Log4j, the Microsoft on-prem exchange, SolarWinds, or any other similar zero-day or imminent patching and vulnerability management, plus the 24/7 eyes on glass or alerting. Over to you at the news desk, Nina and Dan.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely think the MSSP plays a critical role for the small business. You have a lot of small business owners that may not have the sophistication or understanding or ability to scope some of the work that needs to be done, let alone implement it and understand. You get a lot of these small businesses today that still say they're not vulnerable, they don't have a significant online presence, how could they get hit or whatever it is, and that doesn't really hold true anymore. Often those folks are the low-hanging fruit for the threat actors out there that are throwing a bunch of spaghetti against a wall and trying to see what sticks. And there's a lot of throughput there for them. So we do think that an MSSP that's got great controls, great feedback loop in place, great understanding of the small business environment is sort of vital to that role. I'm sure they're all seeing the question sets come from underwriting teams like Cowbell. They're being asked by their clients to fill out questionnaires as to their security profile and whatnot. So you having an understanding of what the insurers are looking for can help you be proactive in that approach, and maybe be on top of some of that, or reporting or understanding about what's going on out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the only thing I would really add is just, if you are working with a broker, getting ahead and trying to start early. If you have a renewal that's April 1st, starting today is probably too late, because you need time to talk to your broker so they can understand what your current status is and maybe give some feedback on, well, can you implement this? Can you add this prior to going and trying to procure insurance? So I think it's important to know that this is important. If you are looking to procure cyber insurance in this day and age, it is a process that's not a quick turnaround. It's something that you do need to put some time and effort into, similar to how you would want to put time and effort into your own controls for your company.
Let me ask
that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Stuart. If you need to do.
I was going to say, I'm curious about something. We just had the folks from NIST on one of our earlier sessions, and they talked about in stage 1 data gathering, it's no longer acceptable to do a vulnerability management scan once a month or once a quarter. They're now starting to require not only continuous scanning, but they're also requiring vulnerability program management, because not only identifying what devices are vulnerable, but make sure you actually have a plan to either address them or move them away from any critical data. I'm just curious, have you seen things like that evolve as you're evaluating organizations?
That's sort of one of the promises of what we do. And if you want to go to the next slide, we do all of this data gathering on a continuous basis and drive the insights and recommendations that we find back to the insured, in a lot of cases to their MSSPs, to engage and fix issues that we've identified. So, as we alluded to earlier, this is an ever evolving, threat landscape for businesses. So what was true 3 months ago is not true in the future. And things like Log4j come out of sort of the blue for folks. And then you've got to be able to be adaptive to that, to understand the risk. So, we really try to focus on that closed loop approach. And I know a lot of the brokers are engaged there as well with services they're providing and trying to get ahead of some of these things. Identifying, operating within that NIST framework is sort of the name of the game. Insurance plays in that, or traditionally has played in that respond and recovery side of it. But I think today, we're further engaged on that identification and then circling everything back and trying to assist the small businesses with the vulnerabilities that have been identified out there. So, that's really the approach anymore, is the ongoing consultation and assistance and You know, if you're just getting a look once a year as to your security profile, you're likely, you know, 10 months behind in what you should be doing.
And,
You know,
and to
Megan,
reflect
while
that
Bryan,
oh, go
I
ahead,
was just
Stuart.
going to say, Megan, while Bryan's commenting, maybe we could put poll number 3 up. It might give us some perspective on this.
And absolutely to reflect what Dan was just saying in the process, that on the broking side, the brokers do. That same kind of cyber loop is something we call. It's the very same kind of, for those of you prior military, the OODA loop, the observe, orient, decide, and act. And it is a continuous process of you upping your cybersecurity. For many of you small companies and the MSPs on this call that support them, your core business is, you know, making cars, making widgets, making pizzas, making people happy, whatever it is. You're trying not to build a cyber unit. You're trying to have a secure company that has cyber people, smart MSSPs, and others behind you, or cloud providers, or whatever you're doing if you're a born in the cloud company. That type of not looking at this as a once a year insurance discussion, looking at it as a dual use technology of your security journey, of which one part is the insurance companies. I'll tell you, these very same questions with a NIST standard, with everything else, will be asked by all of your external parties. If you have just landed a great contract supplying a large logo, you're going to see the same questions because of the same data from the underwriters. This is not a once only set of questions and value. And like with Dan and like with Nina, we have a process that actually gives you your own kind of secret credit scores from the underwriters as part of the brokering process, as Dan is explaining, is also part of Cowbell, one of our partners, and the insurers that we work with at Aon, a part of their process to give you that back before you're talking to the underwriters. I don't have to call them undertakers. And outside counsel, or outhouse counsel is another one I often sometimes slip on. So just to be polite to the lawyers too. The underwriters, because if you had a car that has no airbags or seatbelts, go try and get insurance. It's the same thing for cyber, but we can have that discussion before you're standing in front of the underwriter process and give you those couple of months to implement MFA, improve your firewalls. So those kind of things, and I'll hand it back to Stuart or team to guide us, but from the results, the continuing monitoring is great, monthly scanning and remediation, but we were seeing with Log4j, you know, exploitations in days or a week or two, and that's the new normal, unfortunately. For those of you a little older, same thing with virus updates back in the 90s and year 2000. You used to do them by hand, now they're automatic. You're going to see more of that in the vulnerability management as well.
So I'm just curious. So, you know, roughly 66% of the people on this call don't do continuous scanning. I'm actually kind of surprised the number's as low as it is, because the number's normally higher than that. That may speak to the audience that's interested in hearing about cyber insurance. But just curious, kind of what you see when you know, what's your perspective? When you see, how often do you do continuous scanning and continuous monitoring and automated alerting? Do you normally see that number as high as 30%?
Nina, I'll go to you and then Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah, from an underwriting perspective, you know, we're asking about patch management and things like that. And we do see that to be, you know, for typically more frequent with the larger the insured gets in terms of revenue size. So, you know, if you're under 10 million in revenue as a business, you know, you might get a blank stare with a question like that. But as businesses sort of go upstream there into the middle market, yeah, we do tend to see it be more frequent. The way we underwrite to it, you know, for certain businesses, it may be a totally no-go area if you're not doing it on a continuous basis. For certain industry classes that are more risky. But for others, you know, we still try to design a product there and provide a little bit of carrot and stick approach to say, hey, you've got to get your house in order. We're really looking for something on a more frequent basis here. In the meantime, you only qualify for Y from us, or whatever that might be. And I mean, Nina, you could tell us how that's perceived from a broking perspective, but we think we're hopeful that it'll drive change and adaptation of new controls and procedures and protocols that ultimately helps everybody.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we've said this, it's ever evolving of what we're looking at. I think I remember maybe last year we were looking at scanning and it was maybe just a yes or no question or once a year, and now we're saying it needs to be continuous. And the same thing with all these other different controls. There's always going to be something new that we're looking at, something new that underwriters are focusing on. So it is really paying attention to reports that come out or any type of white papers that you see, and really staying on top of the emerging trends, because that is what underwriters are going to start to focus on. I think what I've seen is we are a little bit reactionary in what we're focusing on in terms of controls, but we aren't that far behind. And so if it's something that's new or emerging and you don't have it in place, it's definitely something that you would want to start looking into, and really take advantage of trying to continue to always adapt and implement new controls.
And go ahead, you can go to the next slide, please, or we can go to Q&A, but I wanted to queue up one other point for Nina and Dan to kind of talk about is, we're talking about cyber insurance, but for you small, medium businesses and MSPs on the line, the term I always use is it's more of a tapestry of insurance. Your cyber insurance, your business interruption, your errors and omissions, your D&O policy, your crime policy. Talking to Nina and Dan and others about what trigger events are for different types of insurance, it is absolutely something you want to think about while looking at the concept of cyber insurance, but there's a lot of multifaceted things, and this is a rock star 2 to ask about it if there's something you want to talk about.
Dan, anything you want to add to that, or I've got a number of questions I'm curious about?
I think Bryan is spot on with some of that. A lot of coverage talks to other coverage. Nina, your team likely starts seeing D&O claims from happening on a business that didn't have appropriate cybersecurity controls in place. So while the cyber policy is reacting to a specific ransom event, their directors and officers policy might have to step in to pay a claim for a board that maybe had their head in the sand. So there's certainly a lot of that going on out there. When we used to talk about cyber insurance 5 years ago, it was data breach. It was how many records do you have on hand, and it's going to cost you X dollars per record to notify people and provide credit monitoring services. And really, that's not it anymore. So, or not only it anymore.
Yeah, I think a lot of our conversation today is really focused on ransomware, extortion, but there are other facets of an cyber insurance policy, and those are not that we didn't mention: data breach, privacy, and security, and those are still important today. There's still things that if you have a lot of records that you're collecting, and you're working in California, Europe, where it might be, that's still really important as well. So it is really making sure that this is a huge focus, and it's really important. I think, like we've discussed, it's ever evolving. There's always something new, but there are other things that can come into play if you're not paying attention to this, that would affect other lines, other parts of your insurance policy that the underwriters are looking at.
And to dovetail off that one thing before we go into the question and answer is, this is not just about ransomware and not just about the external adversary, although there's a lot of them. Bad levers, the loss of your intellectual property, somebody stealing all of your sales contacts and founding a competing company. There's a lot more to cyber insurance than just evil ransomwares. And one final note, because of the conflict, a lot of even the ransomware payment vendors are no longer paying Conti because they came out in support of Putin, which means that if you're ransomed, you could normally get a payment vendor in the US to help pay the ransom. that makes it even worse. Many of them are not paying Conti, which leaves you to your own devices. So there's a lot of discussion around that, but this is not just about ransomware, although that is all the rage these days.
So getting back to the ransomware and the rage for a second, I'm curious, we see, probably 50% of the small businesses in the US between, 5 employees and 100 or 1,000 employees, I would say, they probably think this is not going to hit me. I don't have to worry about it. They're never going to find me. I don't have much of a presence. Is that changing? And if so, what is the driving factor for that? Is it something in their business? Is it something that they saw in the press? Is it something with social media? What's driving them to say, I never thought about insurance in the past, but maybe now's the right time?
Well, I'll answer that from the threat perspective, which is where I play in with the way that Nina and Dan support the market. And of course, Dan's company and Aon bring threat intel, but people are viewing this. We've got to get away from the kid in the hoodie analogy. This is a $1 trillion industry or more every year. And there are tiers of criminals for tiers of victims. There are people that target banks for $100 million frauds. There are people that are ding-dong ransomware at the 50 grand level for SMBs because it's easy and repeatable and they can nail out an evil customer list quicker than they can infiltrate a large economic business above $500 million. So there's a criminal out there just the right size for you, unfortunately, no matter what you do. They've also found, and I've worked a ton of cases, mining industry, forestry industry, some people that are coming online that used to be more terrestrial and hands dirty kind of organizations have become more than just a couple laptops at a mine. The mines are hived together across an organization of 8 or 9. These things, your business is born in the cloud, are then born with the surface area. And for those SMBs that don't think they have a lot of data, go into your shared drive and try and find that one spreadsheet that has everybody's social security numbers in it or the address of every customer you've ever had. And you're going to realize what you have in there. Everybody's sins are in the shared drive. There's a public service announcement for you. So those are the kind of things where there's a criminal of the size and shape for you that has found the birds of a feather in your industry have weaknesses they can exploit faster at a smaller price, and they can bunch those up and make money.
And I always thought Microsoft SharePoint was the most confidential thing we could have.
I'll share a joke, not kidding, this is what we used to say. When I was at the CIA, we said, if you want to keep something secret from everybody, post it in SharePoint, nobody could find it. Now that's not SharePoint's fault, but that's every SharePoint in every organization, including, God bless them, Aon. Nina's like, oh, it's in SharePoint. I'm like, you might as well just tell me it doesn't exist. I can't find it. So,
yeah, I mean,
to leave the room. Or Nina, sorry.
Go ahead.
Just quickly, one thing I'd add is I think sometimes companies or people might see in the news, oh, this big company had a ransomware event, or these big companies are having these ransomware events. But those are really the publicly known ransomware events. There are many private ransomware events that never make the news, that are never disclosed to the public. And so I think that's also something that maybe people don't realize is it happens to everyone. Like Bryan said, there's tiers, but I think when you see in the news, oh, this oil company, this meat packing plant, they seem big. And so you're like, these bad actors are only targeting the big companies, but it's not the case. And so when we're working with my clients, all sorts of clients, all industries, all sizes are getting hit by ransomware.
So, and the SMBs, again, have a bigger problem with somebody taking a copy of all the sales contacts or all the legal files. I have bad levers from law firms. And the other side of a bad lever, by the way, a community service note, is a bad arriver. The person that steals from their last company and poisons the well of your company by injecting all of those ill-gotten data bits into the heart of your code in your product or into your sales system. Removing that is like changing your blood type. It's horrible, it's expensive, and it's litigious. So make sure you have a bad arriver defense as well as a bad leaver one.
Hey, Dan, curious from your standpoint, we got a question about the role the federal government or the states might play as it relates to what they may require from small businesses or what insurance companies might have to provide for small businesses. Just wondering if you could comment a little bit about, how is that evolving, and is it similar to some of the compliance and regulatory issues like we talked about earlier, from monthly vulnerability scanning now to continuous scanning as a requirement?
Yeah, we're starting to see an evolution there, right? And different legislative bodies pay more attention to it. Nina alluded to California privacy regulations and CCPA and GDPR and things like that are out there being modified, being adjusted. We're starting to see, potential federal requirements for reporting of cyber incidents for, critical infrastructure and things like that. I think if some of that comes into play, it will maybe open a lot of people's eyes to the scope and breadth of what's going on out there. Because right now, a lot of this stuff does remain hidden, and public knowledge is a little limited onto, just things you're reading in the newspaper that happen every once in a while. We even see it on down to, potential legislation in California for mandating cyber coverage for businesses that have data on hand. The same way that, if you have employees, you're required to have workers' compensation, the potential future of required to have cyber insurance if you're collecting any personal information, processing credit cards, things of that nature, which would really hit almost every business out there. So, the market is going to have to address those sort of mandates and understanding. There's going to have to be capacity and carriers to support any sort of that stuff. Mandate without the ability to insure for it is a pretty difficult conversation to have. So, a lot of changes on the horizon. We're monitoring a lot of these things, trying to keep abreast of them, but it is the same way the threat actors are finding new ways into businesses. Legislation is taking a bit of a more hands-on approach, I think, over the past, 12 months than we would have seen before that.
Well, unfortunately, we seem to have lost our slides, but Nina, could you comment on your slide talking about the price increases over the last couple of months? I should say couple of quarters. Could you just elaborate a little bit about that slide and kind of what's happened in the pricing marketplace, and then maybe some futuristic perspective on where you think it's going?
Yeah, so in Q1, I believe it showed around 30%, Q1 of 2021, 30%. So that was really the start of the hardening of the market. Here we go. The hardening of the cyber market. We were starting to see the losses from 2019 to 2020 hit the insurers' books, and ransom demands were starting to be paid out. As we started seeing all these different demands being paid out, when you pay a ransom demand, then the effect is more extortion happens, right? Because the bad actors are seeing that there's more, they're able to get the money from these insurers. So there were more incidents, but this graph is not really representative of the claims that happened in 2021. It's really the rates increase is from the previous year, where we saw the ransom payout, but then there's an other payout, which is most likely tied to business interruption. So you're shut out of your network, you can't collect your revenue, your net income, and so cyber insurance policies will pay for that. And so that payment, it can be exponentially more than a ransom demand. And so, but that has a longer tail. You don't know that business interruption impact right away. And so the insurers started seeing the business interruption tail and that payout increase and increase. And so in Q1, they said, okay, we want, the 30% increase. This seems like it'll help us get back to the profitability level. Then the next quarter, okay, the cost of these claims are still going up. Let's raise that amount. And then that continued throughout the year into Q4, where you see that 100%. And this is really, 100%. It can be a little higher than that too, we've seen. But the thing that we're hoping is in Q1 of 2022 is that it will be around this 100% range. So we are seeing the insurers correct what the increase they demanded for in Q1 of 2021 to match Q4 of 2021. And so that's what we're seeing right now, is that we're looking more in the 100% range, where last year you might have seen a 30%, so you're still going to see that increase. We expect maybe in the summer that it might start to level out, but we still don't think that this year the cyber hard market is going to end. And so we still think that companies are going to see rate increases, premium increases throughout the year. And that's accounting for companies that do have good controls in place. If you don't have the good controls that we talked about, then you might not be able to get coverage. You might have some limitations around coverage, might expect higher retentions than you would ever really want to pay. So there are other things to consider just other than the price when you're looking at procuring insurance.
And for those, and I'll add, and Dan, I'll hand it off to you, is for those playing along with the insurance stuff, maybe for the first time or second time in your lives, what that means besides the 100% above the 100% you were paying last year, so your insurance doubles, the sublimits, they may only cover $500,000 for ransomware extortion. They may sublimit ransomware out of your cyber policy and cover everything else but that. There's a great discussion to be had with Nina, with Dan, about what you're paying for, what is covered, what triggers another policy. Is business interruption part of your coverage or not? Those kind of things. And that's where it is quite nuanced, but those are the other controls besides price alone that insurers and underwriters bring back. And for some, in say the legal industries and professional services, we've seen a 200 or 400% increase as the outlier to this wonderfully smooth trend in those most egregious cases, or some people deciding not to do insurance, but then doubling down on their investments in those 10 or more areas. So it is a balancing act. Dan, over to you for probably much more detail, but that's kind of some of the things we're seeing in the discussions.
No, that's exactly what I was going to speak to was, even with the rate increases, I think you're seeing a lot of cut limits for the same account. People that had a $10 million policy that's not available to them anymore. The sublimits being implemented, certain coverages taken off completely, higher deductibles or retention amounts being put into play. I think some of this speaks to an underpricing for what the risk was in the cyber market over the long term, and a correction being made there. So I don't know that, once things start to level out, I don't know that you'll see a significant decrease in pricing at any point in the foreseeable future. So this is, I think the direction things are headed, and if we start to level out a bit, that it's going to stay at that, perceived elevated premiums versus what they were in the past.
Yesterday we issued a press release about some work that we're doing with Cowbell and integrated into their marketplace. Dan, maybe this is an opportunity. One of the questions we got is, are there organizations that provide IT services, educational programs, and insurance policies? We do some of that with IGI Cybersecurity Services, and our assessment capabilities and our vCISO capabilities integrated into nodeware and vulnerability management, program management. And we have partners like Security Studio that do it with their assessments. You might want to comment a little bit about your marketplace and how people can go to your marketplace to see IT services, educational programs, and insurance policies kind of at least in the same marketplace from an availability standpoint.
Yeah, great point there, Stuart. In our endeavor not to leave people in the middle of the ocean without a paddle, we have established what we call our Cowbell Risk Exchange, which is essentially a set of various vendors and in various disciplines that we can refer people to, that we know are upstanding organizations that understand what the insurance market is looking for, that they can help out. So whether it's MFA or EDR or whatever it is, we've built a marketplace where we may say, hey, you're uninsurable for us. Your controls are not in the greatest spot. Or we may say, hey, you can get insurance through us, but we'd like to see you put this in place in the next 60 days. We don't want to just leave people, small businesses out there with a Google search to try to find somebody that may or may not be reputable. We've taken the step of vetting partners, establishing relationships, maybe discounted pricing in certain instances, and we can direct our insureds, potential insureds, broker partners, whoever is in the distribution life cycle to go there to get those services on a preferential basis.
We have one more poll question that I want to put up specifically around MSPs and organizations that are using MSPs just to fill out the work that we provide back to our advisory council. So if people could fill that out, I would appreciate it. And while you're doing that, I have to ask one question about Ukraine and everything going on with Ukraine, the effect it's had. You've seen the announcement from Lloyd's of London and others. Can you comment a little bit about what's happening in Ukraine as it relates to cybercrime actors and the effects that might be having on the cyber insurance policies, procedures, premiums, payouts?
I'll start with that one, and then I'll bring it around to the crew on what happened last time. Was the Russians used various cyber tools, including Eternal Blue and other things. One of them was particularly targeted at Ukrainian accounting software to try and take out a lot of Ukrainian organizations that went up channel and hit Maersk, the global shipper, and cost them $300 million. Now, everybody's complaining that, quote, cyber policy didn't pay out. The nuance here is it wasn't a cyber policy, it's what's known as silent cyber, unexcluded cyber on a property policy. And also has caused a huge discussion, and one of your people posted this before, about the war exclusion in terms of insurance. So a couple of quick hits. Most cyber policies pay out. A lot of times people are worried about a nation state actor. Right now, the war exclusion was not in a court finding, and Dan, you probably know the case, or Nina better than I do even. It was not intended for cyber. Now, you may see that rewritten. You might want to check that clause the next time you're getting insurance. However, a lot of times you actually don't know if a ransomware or something was a true nation state actor. Even if Conti says they love Putin, doesn't mean they actually work for him. So those are the impacts. And for those of you, a couple of things. If you deal with Ukraine, get supplies from Ukraine, have a development shop in Ukraine, make sure to further segment to protect both your intellectual property and anything potentially coming upstream, and then also work to protect your people, backup data in country if you have it, etc. I'll hand it off to the insurance experts on that side, but those are kind of on the threat sector, some of the things you could walk away and at least tune a little to not have a claim, and then we can talk about what the claims look like.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
Go ahead, Dan.
No, go ahead.
Just going off of Brian's comments about the war exclusion, it is definitely something that we're have a heightened sense of awareness about and are looking at. And every insurer has their own war exclusion and definition around cyber terrorism. But the answer about if it's insurable or not, it depends, and we don't know yet. It is on a case-by-case basis. So like Bryan said, I think the best approach is to be as proactive as you can be if you are in Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, those countries, and just take a proactive stance around what you're doing, and then just stay in contact with your broker and your insurer and just make sure everyone knows this is part of your company and this is a risk that you're worried about. And you don't necessarily have to alert every insurer without any event, but at least keep in contact with your broker and make sure that they know so that that if there should be a situation, knock on wood, it doesn't happen, but that you're prepared and you're ready to address it and ready to answer questions that the insurer will definitely have around an incident. So yeah, we don't know yet. We can't give you a definite blanket answer around that, but it is good to be proactive and be prepared.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Standard policy is going to have a war exclusion. You'll see, likely a carve back of that exclusion for cyber terrorism. But there are OFAC concerns with paying threat actors that are on a sanctions list that need to be taken into account. Any policy wording changes and things like that, would be vetted out. But, really what we're trying to do is drive resources around those sort of industries that we've identified as potential targets with the conflict going on right now. So, we're looking at things like banking and financial services, IT services, including MSPs, internet service providers, shipping and logistics, utilities, and things of that nature, to make sure that they're on sort of heightened alert and are, taking whatever precautionary measures that they can take to prevent something from happening in the first place.
And the other thing I'll say quickly about this is, as Nina and Dan has said, and Stuart, thanks for having us today, make sure you know who your panel providers are. Aon bought Strauss Freeburg, the part of the company I work for, to have that kind of proactive service, pen testing and cyber smoke jumpers. And the people you're going to have to call, and it's going to be Friday night at 9 p.m. or Sunday morning at 8 a.m. That's the only time these happen, by design of the bad guys. So honored, Stuart, I'll hand it back to you for kind of close out, but really appreciate you letting us all come and talk to the SMBs. And hopefully you leave today with some things you can do, even if you end up calling us or not calling us, some things you can do to have a better year.
So first of all, I want to thank the panel. A couple of things for people to think about. We have an upcoming session around compliance. As I mentioned, Tony Sager from the SIS-18 folks will be with us in a couple of weeks, talking about how do you implement compliance in your organization. We're also going to have a session with the folks at Cysurance, specifically around cyber liability, and how do you get insured, how do you stay insured, how to make sure your company is insurable. So those will be coming up. You can see those on our website. You also, you see on the 24th, we will have our next live demo and peer Q&A session. So those are available to you as well. But I want to use this opportunity. There's been a lot of questions, both in the chat and in the question box, plus pre-submitted. So if there are other topics you'd like to see us cover, other speakers you'd like us to get in this SMB educational series, if you could drop us a note to our website, let us know. We would appreciate that. We're happy to have this group back. We're happy to continue to discuss cyber insurance and the various effects that's going on with it. So with that, I just want to remind you the recording will be available on YouTube. If anybody wants to watch the recording, you see their contact information here. The slides will be available as well. And as always, I always tell people this is about taking a couple of simple steps to make yourself smarter and to make your organization just a little bit stronger. And I think you got some great opportunities to do that today. I want to thank Dan, Nina, and Bryan for participating today. And as always, if you have any other topics, let us know. Otherwise, participate in our LinkedIn events. And we want to continue to collaborate, not only us and you, but you and your peers. So if there's conversations in the LinkedIn events, let us know, and we'll look forward to working with you there. So with that, I want to thank everybody for their time. I want to thank the panel, and we'll drop off right on schedule. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.